Welcome to this week's episode of the Warlock's Brew. I'm the MaroonWarlock, and today we're going to go with another one of my personal brews, and this one is for standard. It is mono red deck wins, if you will, effectively burn. Um, it was designed with the budget player in mind. It's just meant to burn face and discard and draw cards and all that. The only really expensive cards in the deck and sideboard, I think, are just a Glorybringer and Hazrat the Fervent. And that's just because this card's going to probably see some modern play, I think at least, and also it's just a good card right now in standard. And then Glorybringer is a good card in standard. So with that, let's get started on the rest of the deck. As I said, it's very burn centric, so we have our shocks that deal 2 damage. It's instant speed. If I had Bolt, I'd use Bolt, obviously, but this is standard. Standard makes me sad sometimes. We got our Fiery Tempers, and we have Discard Enablers for said Fiery Tempers. And we got Incendiary Flow. Jesus. Incendiary Flow is relevant again now that the Kitty Cat is banned, because you don't just lose when you Incendiary Flow someone, and it's relevant because I've been hearing inklings of zombie lists being prevalent, so being able to exile things with the 3 damage is nice, and then also just being able to Searing Spear someone in the face is also very nice. In our 1-drop slot for creatures, we have our Flameblade Adepts, which Menace is an amazing ability in my opinion. It's a 1/2. And whenever you cycle or discard a card, it gets +1/+0 till end of turn. As you see, we have the Fiery Tempers to help out with the discard effects. We have Insolent Neonates here for card draw, and again, you can get that cheap 1 damage in. This is red deck wins, so you care about getting your opponent's life to 0 before they get yours to 0. That's basically all you care about. And it, of course, has a discard a card, which triggers with the Flameblade Adept in order to draw a card after sacrificing the Neonate. We also have a place of Tormenting Voice, which a part of the cost is to discard a card. I was running Cathartic Reunion, but because of the way this deck plays, there are way too many times where you're stuck with just one other card in hand that I think Tormenting Voice, while it's not as good in this style of build, is better. If you prefer the gamble you take with Cathartic, which is very red to be taking that kind of a gamble of being stuck with 1 card in hand, by all means, go for it. I'm just going with my experiences testing the deck prior to this. We got a pair of Harness Lightnings, just because it helps deal and clear the way for those larger creatures, and also gives us some energy, which is a decent resource in standard right now. We have some Blood Rage Brawlers, which again enable the Flame Blade, enables Madness on the Fiery Tempers, and it's a 4/3 body for 2, which always feels good. And if you play him with no cards in hand, you don't lose a card, so you just kind of win in that regard. And speaking of energy with the Harness Lightning, we're running a playset of Lathnu Helion, just because 4/4 hasty guys, and you get the 2 energy end step cost, that if you have a Harness Lightning, they don't have creatures on the board, you can just stockpile some energy to feed to the Helion. We have some Aether Hubs for the same reason, because when you're in mono red, having that colorless isn't too much of a hindrance because you have all the other mountains. And I would highly recommend mountains over something like forest, just personal taste. We also have, as you saw, Hazoret, which is the indestructible haste god, 5/4. And this deck, again, you're trying to get as close to Hellbent as possible anyway, so most times that you play Hazoret, she should be active. And then on top of that, her second ability gives you a bit of a clock in addition, where she effectively is dealing 7 a turn. Or if, say you play Hazoret, your last card's a Fiery Temper, you can discard the card, pay the red and 1, pay the extra red for Madness, and then boom, you just dealt 5 damage, and then you have the other 5 coming in from Hazoret probably. And then topping out the curve, is a pair of Glorybringers. Its exert ability is nice for clearing some of the board. It's fly or haste. The high ends of this curve, obviously, you have to have haste in order for this to work. 4/4, nice dragon, all those things. And again, this one's running a little bit more lands than the last episode we did, which was a modern build, so it's at 22. It's a little tough to get to the 5 for the Glorybringer, which is why there's only 2, and only 2 of the Hazarets. You mostly want to be trying to burn them down with what's in this range here. Moving on to the sideboard, it is a little chopped together at times. We have a pair of Harness Lightnings just to finish up the playset, and just in cases where they're just playing really big creatures, you want to try to get as much energy as possible to deal a quick bullet to take them down. With the same logic of creatures in mind, we have a pair of Lightning Axe, because they trigger with the Flame Blade Adept, they can combo with Fiery Temper, and it's just a good removal card. But again, because you want to be dealing as much damage as possible in the main board, these are in the sideboard for now. It's one of those cards that might end up in the main board in the long run, but we'll see. We got a cut. The to ribbons portion isn't really going to happen. This could splash black if you really wanted to, but again, I did this with budget in mind, and I just saw red and 1 to deal 4 damage, no questions asked. Not bad as a 1-of, and I had the extra slot. We have some Magma Sprays, a pair of them, to deal 2 damage to a creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. Again, with that whole zombies are on the rise right now, as I've noticed in Standard, being able to say that's exiled is really nice. Like, I would probably side those in against zombies and take out 2 of the shocks, just because it's better in that matchup. We have a couple of Devouring Flames as like a sort of way to deal with Planeswalkers. Like, the bouncing the land is kind of rough, and the 3 mana is rough, but it's 5 damage. It kills just about any Planeswalker as soon as it drops down, which is kind of important, given Gideon. Yeah. We have a pair of Collective Defiance. I like the ability to escalate, and if I find that I want some carpet effects and just need creature removal, or just all the choices it has on there, the damage to either the opponent or the creature, and then the cycling effect, which again combos with Flame Blade. I loved Flame Blade when I was building this with this in mind. Same thing, it also helps thin the hand out for Hazoret eventually. We got a pair of Sweltering Suns. This is for some of the other hyper aggro matchups you would deal with in this deck, and then cycling's always nice to draw cards. But it's mostly there to deal with sort of the hyper aggro that you'll see in Standard on occasion. If they try to flood the board, you can drop Sweltering Suns and wipe everything, because we're running only a few creatures, and then Hazoret and Glorybringer don't even get touched by this anyway. And last but not least, we have a pair of Bi-Force. And this is just to deal with decks that rely on a lot of artifacts, things like Heart of Kiran, because none of our straight-up damagers other than Harness Lightning in the main really deal with those. It helps with Key to the City, which is another card that can be a problem at times, because if you're on the defensive, you want to have that flexibility to maybe block with Hazoret or block with the Neonate, although you would rather not be there, but it's just to keep options open. So that's the 75. Like I said, for the most part, if you're building this online, right now Hazoret and Glorybringer are about 3 tickets each, a little bit more, closer to 4. Same thing with Sweltering Suns, I believe. Beyond that, though, I think the most part, this deck, everything's just commons and uncommons, relatively cheap. And same thing goes for paper. The Glorybringers and the Hazorets are about 10, I think, in paper right now. Sweltering Sun might be $3 in paper. But beyond that, like, everything's relatively cheap because they've been in Standard for a while or they've been reprinted. So, again, this is going to be going into a friendly league, not the competitive league, because I want to try to go for a more FNM style feel. We're going to have some fun with this, see how it does, and after the final round, I'll do my usual evaluation. So, Stick with me, and we'll see how this deck does. I'm the Maroon Warlock, and this is this week's episode of the Warlock's Brew. Red deck wins.